Recent years, we are seeing a significant surge in the influence of the extreme right in the United States. Can you give us some insights into the factors contributing to this rise and discuss the potential implications they may have on the country's political system and societal fabric?
The main factor really is that it has won elections or won seats of power. There's a lot of reasons why. There's been some structural changes, commonly called gerrymandering. There's been the Republican Party has been better over the last 20 years at gaining elected officials in lower, from school boards, city councils, that sort of thing. So there's that structural reason, but there is also the reality that Trump in his 2016 campaign, starting in 2015, he opened up the possibility of saying a lot of things that, politicians couldn't say. And he didn't just open up that possibility, he won with that. And when Trump's sort of rhetoric became a winner, became an election winner, a lot of people in politics reconsidered. And there is like this real element, this real grassroots element, people that feel forgotten, all of that. But there is also a very pragmatic element of people who saw that sort of positioning as a way to win. Usually what happens in the United States is when one side or the other becomes radicalized, they have a rise and fall. And the question is whether this sort of rhetoric, I wouldn't call it radicalized, it is more extreme than what we've seen before, whether it would have a rise and fall or whether, as its proponents would wish, it will have a rise and become the mainstream.
You know what amazes me about the far right is that although the far right faction represents only a small percentage of the Republican Party and the American electorate, they seem to have a disproportionate influence in Congress and American politics. They have been able to push their agenda and block legislation that they oppose, and they have been also able to sway public opinion and mobilize their supporters. Despite being a minority, why does the far right seem to wield significant influence in Congress and American politics?
Well, the two-party system is actually designed so that minorities who don't share interests with the majorities can have their voices heard. Now, that system can be abused. There has been a lot of debate about whether Senate rules should be changed so that minorities don't wield that much power. But the reality is that it is one of the fundamental elements of democracy that if there is a group that is isolated from the mainstream, they must have a voice because they are also more threatened by the mainstream. So it's one of those things that a lot of people who are on the other side of the aisle, they don't like it when they're sort of in the ideological majority. But when minoritarian groups are under threat, and mind you, this is not obviously not worked out perfectly throughout American history. Minorities have not been fully represented and are currently not fully represented. But this political minority is really just an expression of how the system is designed to sort of raise all political voices. It is a system that can be gamed and played, though. So it is also true that it's not working it's not a system that was working perfectly for African Americans, though it obviously working better than it has in the past, or for Latinos, or for a lot of minorities. But it is the system that's designed to do that, and it can be painful to use sometimes, and Republicans have used it in a way that is very painful to other minorities, for starters, and to Democrats and to liberals and progressives. But it is just simply the nature of the system.
And President Biden has called for shedding the poisonous atmosphere in Washington. What's your reaction to it? Why do you think he said so? What's your take on this remark?
Well, it's a wish a lot of people in Washington had, frankly. It has become a toxic environment. It's hard to think of a time when the two sides disliked each other so much. There have always been differences in opinion, but there is a real dislike Honestly, I think most people in Washington think if that is to be shed, another election has to happen. The 2024
In
election, I think
2024,
a
I
lot of
will
people on both
return to
sides of
my
the aisle
house
are
and get our
looking forward
country
to it.
back on track.
Both obviously thinking that they will win and that more like-minded people to them will come to Washington, and their views will become more the mainstream view. But right now, with such a closely divided Congress in both houses, it is contagious to the rest of the city where both sides are sort of dug up in foxholes, and there's very little negotiation going on.
Can the U.S. fix the problem of its bipartisan politics? If so, what needs to be done?
I mean, historically, it always has. Of course, it can. I think, and it's not exclusive to the U.S. Any country with a democratic system will go through these situations. What needs to happen in the United States is simply the two parties have to find what common goals exist, and there are always common goals. Not even just in a country, as humanity, the economic growth is usually the simplest common goal. And once they find paths toward that common goal, there will probably be a moment where there is a bipartisan vote where it seems like the conflicts are over, and they won't be over. That it is the nature of a bipartisan system that the two sides will butt heads against each other. But to the extent that we've seen over the last 5 years, it is more worrying than previous occasions. And the other variable is it comes down to leadership. There's a big division uh, between people who support former President Trump and people who support President Biden or simply oppose former President Trump. He has been a polarizing figure, and whether he comes back as president or doesn't and retires, that whenever the Trump age is over, the polarization brought on by Trump will change. It might not decrease. Maybe, it might continue in the form of someone else, but it will change because he has such a unique personality and such unique character.